It's time for Ranger Prospect Watch. Gabe Perreault continues to set the college hockey world on fire. Plus, was it a good idea to call Matt Rempe back up to the Rangers? And will he fight Tom Wilson?
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1171 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So wanted to kind of shift gears a little bit here today. Obviously, the Rangers going to be back in action a little bit later tonight on the road against the Washington Capitals. But I figured this is a good time as the different seasons of different leagues around the world really get started to check in on some of the Ranger prospects. We're mostly going to focus in on guys that are playing with the Hartford Wolfpack, but we'll make some exceptions here and there as well. And I wanted to go ahead and start today's episode by talking about two players, specifically Brennan Othmann and Gabe Perreault. There's a lot of very promising young players in the Ranger pipeline, but for all intents and purposes, and I think with little argument, most people see these two as the two biggest, Ranger prospects in the system. If two players are going to go on to become superstars, it'll probably be these two guys. Now, you never know for sure, of course. Obviously, there could be a 6th-round pick that we're not even thinking of right now that maybe at some point turns into a superstar player. Henrik Lundqvist as a 7th-rounder certainly comes to mind there. But, yeah, for all intents and purposes, like I said, these are the two guys to really keep an eye on. First of all, we'll start with Brennan Othmann, and he was dealt an unfortunate blow not too long ago, suffered an upper body injury, and will now be out from 4 to 6 weeks. Obviously, a very unfortunate break for Brennan Othmann. He got injured. Injuries happen. It's not his fault. It's nobody's fault. But this is somebody that seems to be coming into this offseason, coming into this preseason, seems to be on the cusp of making it to the New York Rangers. Obviously, he was called up for 3 games last year, but when I say make it to the Rangers, I mean on a more permanent basis. And obviously now this kind of throws a monkey wrench into that, but he's coming off of a really strong first season with the Wolfpack, had 49 points in 67 games last year, was off to a very good start this game as well. But this very likely results in his season debut with the Rangers this year being pushed back at least a little bit. Now, there's no guarantees. We could, even if this injury didn't happen, it's possible that, Brennan Othmann goes through the entire season and he just stays with the Hartford Wolfpack, and the Rangers are getting a lot of production at the NHL level, and they just never see the need to call him up. But I get the feeling that sooner or later it would have been Brennan Othmann's time, and it still might happen, but whatever date that Brennan Othmann was going to make his season debut for the Rangers this year, it has now been pushed back fairly significantly, I would say, because even if he only misses a month, that's a month less of development time that he's getting at the AHL. But it's been interesting to watch Othmann over the last couple of years. I thought coming into training camp this year that he probably had as good or better of a chance than any Ranger rookie of making the NHL team. Not counting Matt Rempe. I think Rempe always had the inside track. But when you look at the guys that participated in that 2-game rookie series against the Flyers, you look at all the forwards, all the goalies, all the defensemen, et cetera, et cetera. You tell me, okay, which of these Ranger prospects has the best chance of breaking camp with the Rangers on opening night? I would have said Brennan Othmann, and Othmann did okay in the rookie games. He did okay in the preseason as well. He won one of the rookie games with a shootout in the preseason. There were times where we saw that blend of skill and snarl that the Rangers liked so much, and it's what led them to take him in the first round as they did. Scored a very impressive goal on a breakaway in the preseason. Also, there were some times where he was mixing it up physically as well. Don't know that he really jumped off the screen as much as I was hoping. Some of you were probably hoping as well. But then again, he is just 21 years old, and it's possible that our expectations, we let them run wild a little bit. That's at least a possibility. I'm still very bullish on Brennan Othmann's future, and I think he'll go on to have a really nice career in the NHL, hopefully many, many years with the New York Rangers. Again, this is an unfortunate setback, but there are a lot of positives here. To begin with, Othmann, before he was injured, was off to another fantastic start with the Hartford Wolfpack. And I have to wonder if he might already be up with the Rangers had this not happened. It's not as crazy as it sounds because we've seen them go with a lot of different, 12th forwards in the lineup. Everybody from Brodzinski to Rempe to other fourth line type players, such as, obviously Carrick and Edstrom. Brennan Othmann might have been right there in the mix with the Rangers. We saw Jake Lecision get called up. Now, he was never going to play, and I think that was more of a paper transaction. But the bottom line, I do think he would have been more in the mix and more of a candidate to be in the lineup by now had he not suffered this injury. But, again, still just 21 years old. He's got some time, and I do think that eventually he will get the call from the Rangers this year. He's got to get back. He's got to get healthy. He's got to play in some more games with the Wolfpack. But if there's ever a time where the Rangers need a spark, or not even, maybe Othmann's just playing very well in the AHL and they just feel like it's his time, I think there's a very good chance you're going to see him get called up. If I'm going to guess a month, let me try to figure this out real quick. So we'll say he's out. He's out for 4 weeks. We are at the end of October. We're basically in November at this point. So he misses all of November, gets back in the middle of December. I'm going to say early February for Brennan Othmann. I think that's when we see him make his season debut for the Rangers this season, but we shall see. The other big-time prospect for the Rangers is obviously Gabe Perreault. He is continuing to absolutely dominate at the college level at Boston College. Last season, for anybody that needs a refresher on Perreault here, 19 goals and 41 assists for a total of 60 points in 36 games as a freshman at Boston College. And this year, already has 2 goals and 5 assists in 4 games. He helped win a recent game against Western Michigan, Heck of a play here. Game is tied 2-2. A minute to go, less than a minute to go. And you've got Ryan Leonard for Boston College stealing the puck at the Western Michigan blue line. And just a beautiful give and go with Perreault back and forth, couple of passes, and Leonard able to score from the doorstep there thanks to a brilliant pass by Perreault. And there was another video that was kind of making its rounds on social media. Some of you might have seen it. This is a game a little bit earlier than that against AIC, where Perreault faked out the entire defense. Now, when people say that, usually you're exaggerating a little bit. It probably means that, he faked out a forward, he faked out a defenseman, and then he beat the goalie, and we say, oh, he faked out the entire defense. No, on this play, Perreault literally faked out the entire defense because they were skating for a side. He got control of the puck at his own blue line, went straight through the neutral zone, weaving and maneuvering around everybody, plays the puck through his own legs, goes around a defenseman like he's standing still, draws another defenseman toward him, and then makes a behind-the-back pass across the top of the crease to his teammate. Wide open net. Now, the goalie made a phenomenal save here, but honestly, that's none of our concern. Perreault did his part. He took on the entire defense, went right around everybody, and had a brilliant pass behind his back at the very end there as well. The skill level is just off the chart. You watch what he does at the college level. Sooner or later, I'm going to have to just watch an entire Boston College game because, they've got Perreault. They've got Drew Fortescue there, too, another, highly thought-of Ranger prospect. And Perreault just puts on a show night in and night out. It's not just the points. It's the fact that he's just on a whole nother level than a lot of his opponents. So I think that might actually be worth a watch at some point for myself and maybe even for some of you guys as well. But can't say enough about the job that Gabe Perreault has done and just how good he looks. First of all, last year as a freshman and so far this year as a sophomore at Boston College. But we're going to keep everything rolling in just a second. I want to shift our attention to the Wolfpack, just kind of in general. We're going to take a general look at how the team has done so far, and then look at some of the other prospects in addition to the aforementioned Brennan Othmann. Brett Berard off to a fantastic start there. We'll talk about that. And also going to talk a little bit later about Matt Rempe being called up and if we should expect to see him fight Tom Wilson in this game against the Capitals here tonight. So we'll do all that fun stuff in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money, sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks is the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Once again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. All right, going to go ahead and keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers. A huge shout out to the everydayers as always. Thanks for always being on this roller coaster ride that we call New York Ranger hockey. And next episode, We are going to be breaking down everything that happens between the Rangers and the Caps. They play on Tuesday night in DC. I believe the puck drop is at 7:30 for this one. Could be wrong. Might want to double check that, but I'm pretty sure it's at 7:30. And that episode will then be available by Wednesday at the latest. So definitely looking forward to seeing the Rangers back in action here as they go for their second straight win. But for right now, let's go ahead and talk about the Hartford Wolfpack and some of the players that have stood out early for the Pack thus far in the season. So first of all, a general overview of the Pack so far. They currently sit at 3-2-1. Their most recent 2 wins have both been in overtime. So the early parts of the season for the Wolfpack certainly not lacking in terms of theater, dramatics. It's interesting, though, because, they win those 2 games in overtime. And to be fair, they lost a game in a shootout this year as well. But if you lose those 2 games that went into overtime, and I know woulda, coulda, shoulda, but at that point, you've only won 1 out of your first 6 games, and the vibes are considerably different. But the bottom line, they won those games, they came up clutch when it mattered, and they are 3-2-1 to start the year. They had Berard score against the Islanders in overtime. That gave the Wolfpack a 5-4 win on October 19th. And then more recently, they had Bo Grew score in overtime to give the Pack a 4-3 win over Lehigh Valley. That occurred last Friday. And in their most recent win, the one after that one, the Wolfpack lost 5-2 at home against Springfield, and they are back in action on Wednesday at home against Grand Rapids. So the guy I got to start by talking about here, and I think I mentioned him very briefly in the last section, but we'll talk about him proper here. That's Berard. We talked about how in the offseason, in the preseason, the rookie games and whatnot, Brennan Othmann was kind of the guy and the person that you were looking for to maybe make the Ranger team, but not too far behind him, I don't think, was Berard. When you look at Ranger forwards going into training camp and who's the most likely to make the team out of the camp, I would have said Othmann number 1, probably Berard number 2. I mean, kind of a toss-up between him and Adam Edstrom, and I think myself and maybe a lot of us may have underestimated Adam Edstrom a little bit because he did play well when he was called up to the Rangers last season for the 11 or so games that he played for the Rangers. So maybe he had more of a path to the Rangers than some of us probably realized. Certainly more than I probably, indicated while doing this show. But with Berard, I just felt like, it was maybe his time. He obviously had a fantastic season with the Wolfpack last season. But unfortunately, throughout, the training camp and whatnot and all the preseason games, Berard, again, he did okay. I think he played better away from the puck than he did when he had the puck. There was one time where Lafreniere sprung him on a breakaway and he just kind of fumbled the puck and lost control of it, never got a shot away. And other times where he had the puck, he just looked a little bit nervous. Away from the puck, though, he was playing physical and mixing it up a little bit. I think he did fine in that regard. But man, he is on fire to start this season with the Hartford Wolfpack. 5 goals and 3 assists in just 6 games with the Wolfpack, the overtime winner that I just mentioned a second ago. And this is, keep in mind, just 1 year after his first season with the Wolfpack, a season that saw him lead the Pack in goals with 25. So he's following up nicely for his encore here, his second season with the Hartford Wolfpack. As far as, Berard and his role with the Rangers and if and when he's getting called up this year, my prediction for Berard, I'm going to stick with what I've mostly been going with throughout this entire offseason process and now obviously into the regular season for both the Rangers and the Wolfpack. My prediction is that he ends up getting the cup of coffee treatment that we saw Brennan Othmann get last year, that we saw Will Cooley get the year before that. Last year, Brennan Othmann was up for 3 games. They sent him back down. That always seemed to be sort of the plan there. I mean, I don't know if they had 3 games specifically in mind, but I think they always envisioned it being a short stay for Othmann unless he just completely blew them out of the water. And I think the same thing was also true for Will Cooley 2 years ago when he was up for 4 games, got into a fight, played pretty well, I think, given the situation. And then last year became a regular. Maybe Brennan Othmann becomes a regular at some point this season. We will see. But I think with Berard, you're going to see him probably come up for a few games, then probably head back down, get his NHL debut under his belt, get a taste of NHL action, and then continue to develop with the Hartford Wolfpack. The tough thing right now, and it would be easier if the Rangers were a bad team, but they're not. They're a very good team, and they've shown that repeatedly over the last couple of years, despite what certain fans would have you believe. But if they were a bad team, there'd probably be a spot for somebody like a Berard right now. The bottom line, though, when you look at the Ranger depth chart, I mean, where exactly do you fit him in? It's just very difficult right now. The top 9 forwards on the Rangers, they're locked in. None of them are getting scratched. None of them are getting, waived or whatever else people want to do. Everybody wants to trade this guy or that guy, conveniently forgetting that in many cases they have no move clauses. But those top 9 players are pretty much going to be in the lineup every single night, barring an injury. And then even when you look at the fourth line, And first of all, I think if Brett Berard got called up, I think you'd want him in a top 9 role. You could play him in the 4th line. He's gritty enough that I think he can handle a role like that. But ideally, I think you'd want him in the top 9. But even if you wanted to put him on the 4th line to start things off, maybe just kind of get his feet wet and keep his ice time down his first couple of games in the NHL, there's still a lot of people that are in his way. Jimmy Vesey's going to be back pretty soon. Johnny Brodzinski is there. Sam Carrick and Adam Edstrom, I think they are both off to great starts this season. Carrick comes over with not a whole lot of fanfare. He's played well. Good, solid physical hockey and good defensive hockey as well. Adam Edstrom is showing that he's obviously a physical player. He's gotten into a couple of fights. He's shown some offensive skill too and some impressive burst. I always knew that Edstrom was big or was fast, quote unquote, for a big guy, right? He's fast, period. Edstrom's got some jets that I think some people might be sleeping on, myself included. So you look at it and it's like, man, how do you crack this lineup if you're Brett Berard? I mean, I'm not going to say it's impossible. But as far as him, maybe getting a chance in the top 9, the only way that it would happen, I think, is if there was an injury, and knock on wood, we don't want that to happen. But I'd be curious to see, like, if somebody was to get injured, and again, not wishing for this in the slightest. I would never wish injury on anybody, much less a player on the Rangers, but injuries do happen. If that was to happen to a player on the Rangers, do we then see the Rangers roll the dice and call up a Brett Berard and throw him into the top 9 and just see what he's got? I mean, if he keeps playing like this, I think that's probably your best option. And it's kind of 2 birds with 1 stone. You've got the guy with the most offensive upside, and then the Rangers can also do what I mentioned a second ago and get Brett Berard his first taste of NHL action, even if it is a short stay, 2 games, 3 games, 5 games, whatever it might be. You've done some positive things there. So Brett Berard off to a fantastic start, leading the way once again for the Wolfpack. Somebody else that we got to talk about is Bo Grew. I mentioned a second ago how Sam Carrick was kind of an afterthought as a free agent pickup. This guy wasn't even a blip on the radar. And it's easy to understand why when you look at his NHL career numbers. More on that in a second. But Grew, I've seen him listed as a center and a left winger. He is still just 24 years old, came over as a free agent. Former second-round pick by the Ducks. Pretty good size, too. 6'2" and 195 pounds. And Grew not too long ago. I mentioned the 2 overtime wins for the Wolfpack. He scored 39 seconds into overtime against Lehigh Valley to give the Pack a 4-3 win. And in 8 games so far, 4 goals and 4 assists for Grew. He had 2 goals and 2 assists, so a 4-point game in the win over Bridgeport on October 19th. And it's really interesting when you look at his career numbers, because when you look at what he's done in the AHL, it's pretty solid. It's pretty respectable. If we combine Grew's last 4 AHL seasons, the 3 with the goals before this year, and now the 1 start of a season here with the Hartford Wolfpack, it's 151 games, 43 goals, 55 assists, so 98 points in 151 AHL games. That's not too shabby at all. And Grew is a former second-round pick by the Ducks, so clearly, there's some skill there and there's some things to like. It's a good player on which the Rangers should take a flyer, and that's what they've done here by, picking him up and putting him with the Hartford Wolfpack. The problem for Grew, and I alluded to this just a second ago, is that he has never, ever, ever even come close to translating into the NHL. I mentioned his points in the AHL, 98 points in 151 games. In the NHL, 65 games. Are you sitting down? 65 games, 1 goal, 4 assists. That's it. That's all he's got. Now, I realize probably not getting a whole lot of ice time, probably playing almost exclusively in a bottom 6 role, but has done nothing with it and has never been able to force his way up the lineup, even on a Ducks team last year, which, if we're being kind here, we'll just say they were a subpar team last season. And by the way, the 1 goal that he scored in the NHL, yeah, it's an empty netter. So it's a good flyer, and he is playing well, and that's awesome. And it's good that, he's one of the guys leading the way offensively for the Wolfpack, but if Brett Berard and even Brennan Othmann, if they're going to have some issues cracking this Ranger team right now, how in the world is Bo Grew going to do it? You know what I mean? Like, he's got all those guys in front of him the same way that Othmann and Berard do, and he's also got Othmann and Berard in front of him. Like, does anyone want to see, if the Rangers need a call-up and they need a spark and they need some more offense, whatever the case might be, does anyone really want to see them call up Bo Grew instead of Brett Berard or Brennan Othmann? Probably not. So, good on him. If he keeps playing like this, he'll continue to turn some heads, but it's just hard to see where the path to playing time with the Rangers is going to be. One other player that I want to mention here, kind of a personal favorite of mine. He got his first goal the other night. That is his only point in 6 games, but I'm talking about Dylan Rubrick, a 6th-round pick in 2023. He's a center. As I mentioned, kind of becoming a favorite of mine. I thought he looked good in the rookie games, playing a physical brand of hockey. Part of the reason I like Rubrick, I'll admit this, it's just the fact that he's 6'7", 205 pounds. And there exists a world, there exists a timeline in the future where we have a Ranger fourth line left to right of Adam Edstrom, Dylan Rubrick, and Matt Rempe. They're all at least 6'7". They're all over 200 pounds. That is a trio of skyscrapers there, basically. So that could be a lot of fun. And, Rubrick, obviously just the 1 goal in 6 games thus far. But in his final season in the OHL, 68 games, 26 goals, 46 assists, so 72 points. He was a point per game player there. So clearly somebody that is not a one-trick pony and not somebody that provides you with no offense. We'll see if he can do it with the Wolfpack, but he's obviously provided offense in the past. And one more thing that I want to mention as it pertains to the Wolfpack, the goalie situation. Somewhat surprisingly, Louis Domingue has gotten 4 games, while Dylan Garand has gotten only 2. That surprises me a little bit. Garand is 2-0, albeit with a 345 goals against average and an 889 save percentage. And Domingue is 1-2-1 with a 419 goals against and an 873 save percentage. Now, the goals against, the save percentage, you can't read too much into it this early in the season. If a goalie gets shelled one time, it's going to take some time for the goals against and the save percentage to kind of right themselves. You're going to need a couple of good games in a row. But it is strange to me that Domingue is getting the bulk of starts here. That's something to keep an eye on going forward. By comparison, last year, Garand ended up with 39 games played for the Wolfpack, and Domingue got 28. So Garand led by quite a bit, and I feel like it'll eventually work its way out where that will be the case, but that is a situation that I'm definitely going to be monitoring. I would expect Garand would at least be out there for the next one, but we shall see. So going to keep everything rolling in just a second. We're going to shift our attention to someone who I suppose you can still call him a Ranger prospect, Matt Rempe, called back up by the Rangers for this game against the Washington Capitals, possibly in anticipation of there being some physicality and some trouble. We're going to talk about that decision in just a second. All right, we just wanted to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, let's go ahead and keep things rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers. Want to go ahead and conclude today's episode by talking a little bit about the decision to call Matt Rempe back up to the New York Rangers. And for starters, we should actually back up just a second. Rempe was obviously sent down for 2 games, or 2 Wolfpack games, rather. And in those 2 games, did not have any points. He was actually also a -3 in the 2 games combined, 2 shots on goal. It's surprisingly difficult to find detailed box scores for the AHL, as far as especially time on the ice. But per Rempe and per Peter Laviolette, it sounds like Rempe got between 16 and 18 minutes a night with the Hartford Wolfpack. So that's obviously a good thing. He can hone his craft, work on different areas of his game, and get basically, at least more than double the amount of ice time that he's going to get in a game with the New York Rangers. So that's a positive thing in its own right. But Laviolette did also confirm, we were talking about this in our last episode, Laviolette has now confirmed that Matt Rempe, in addition to being called back up, will indeed be in the lineup tonight against the Washington Capitals. The other move as well is that per Laviolette, Mancini is going to be back in place of Zach Jones, which makes sense as well. But as far as Matt Rempe goes, this is what Peter Laviolette had to say about the situation. We make the decisions based on what we think we need for any given night. Him going down and playing 2 games and playing 16 to 18 minutes in all situations, that's great for him and his development. He's a young player that's continuing to work at his game, work at his craft. We saw an opportunity, got an opportunity to go down and get him some minutes, and we did that. Now he comes back up here, and we'll make those decisions based on what we need here. And that was in response to Laviolette being asked, I don't know which reporter asked the question, but somebody asked, if there's any caution, I guess, to Matt Rempe essentially being typecast where, well, we're only going to put him in the lineup if we're expecting trouble, if we're expecting a fight. And there's some of that going on here. I think for sure there's no love lost between the Rangers and the Capitals. There's never been any love lost between the Rangers and the Capitals. And then a couple of years ago, when Tom Wilson contracted rabies and attacked Artemi Panarin, that's when things really went to a whole new level. But yeah, I mean, you never know how it's going to go. This could be a tame game for all we know, but when it's Rangers and Capitals, it usually does not take much to light the fuse. You've got the fact that also the Rangers swept the Capitals in the first round last year. You got to figure there's at least some embarrassment on the part of the Capitals. Nobody wants to get dominated. Nobody wants to get swept, but that's exactly what happened last year in the first round. So we'll see. This could be a high temperature game early on, and I think it's good that Rempe's going to be there. A couple other people were also putting this out on social media. Matt Rempe, 2 years ago in the AHL, got into a pretty nasty fight with Dylan McIlrath, former draft pick by the New York Rangers, who has spent more time in the AHL than the NHL, but I believe he's currently with the Capitals. It was a nasty fight. Rempe got off to a good start in this fight, landed a couple of early punches, but McIlrath came back, landed some pretty heavy punches down the stretch. We'll see if those two find each other. And the $1 million question, if Rempe will fight Tom Wilson. It could go either way. I mentioned this in our last episode. I get the feeling that Rempe won't necessarily go looking for that, but I also think he's not going to back away from it either. We saw Tom Wilson wanting to fight Matt Rempe in Game 3 last year in the playoffs, probably looking to spark his team, wake the home crowd up a little bit, and Rempe wouldn't do it because Rempe was too smart to fall for that. But in a game like this, if it gets heated early and things are happening, then I think for sure you could see this happen. And Rempe being there, the word that always gets thrown around is deterrent. He'll be a Tom Wilson deterrent. And I see some of that too. If you look at how Tom Wilson has acted against the Rangers, look at the way Tom Wilson would behave against the Rangers before Ryan Reeves got there, then look at the way he behaved once Reeves was on the Rangers, and then look at how he's behaved since then, since Ryan Reeves left. There is something to be said for intimidation, and there's not many players in the AHL that are more intimidating than Ryan Reeves. I don't think that Matt Rempe is quite on that level yet he's obviously a big dude and very, very strong. I don't think that he strikes fear into the hearts of his opponents the way that somebody like Ryan Reeves does. But Tom Wilson was basically a choir boy the seasons that Ryan Reeves is on this team. He ended up spending about 1.5 years here. You didn't even know Tom Wilson was on the ice. And I think to keep him from running amok, being completely out of control, trying to bully the Rangers, you do need Matt Rempe in the lineup for this game. So I am completely on board with this move. As far as whether they're going to fight or not, I don't know. I know some people are dying to see that. I wouldn't mind it either. I mean, if those two drop the gloves, as I said in yesterday's episode, get the popcorn ready. But, we'll see how it goes. Either way, Matt Rempe's back up, and hopefully he has a strong game. I'm not just looking for the fight. I'm looking for him to hopefully play some good hockey for the Rangers and see if he can carve out a role for himself. Now, it's also possible that this is a one-game stay for Matt Rempe because all indications are that Jimmy Vesey seems to be pretty close to returning. He was wearing a normal jersey at practice the other day. He was out there with the red non-contact jersey for a couple of days, and now that's gone. So you got to figure he's about to slot back in. We'll see how it goes. Matt Rempe could determine that by how he plays in this game, but it's also very possible that Rempe is just here for this one, gets sent back down. Vesey goes back into the lineup in the next one, and we kind of just take things from there. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of where things stand as far as, Matt Rempe is concerned. We'll see how it goes tonight. Very curious to see what kind of game this is going to be. And like I said, this is always a fun matchup for the Rangers because these two teams do not like each other. And as I mentioned just a minute ago, the sweep last year, to me, that just pours gasoline on the fire. And we'll see how everything goes. But I figure we can pretty much call it there for today. One more thing that I want to mention here at the very end. Sam Rosen actually mentioned this during a recent Ranger game. Trying to remember if it was the last one or the one before that, but either way, he did talk about this. Amazon Prime recently released 5 different hour-long episodes of a new series that is called Game 7. And what this does, it basically takes a look at 5 different Game 7s throughout sports history. It's not just hockey. I think there's 2 on hockey, there's 1 on baseball, and I think there's 2 on basketball, if I'm not mistaken. And one of the 5 Game 7s that they decided to focus on was Game 7 of the 1994 Stanley Cup Final between the New York Rangers and the Vancouver Canucks. And I was able to watch it the other day. Highly recommend it if you haven't seen it. It's always fun to relive that season in any way that you can. If you're kind of new to hockey and you weren't around for 1994, the Stanley Cup win, it's a good introduction to that series as well, and just how much it meant for the Rangers to win the Stanley Cup that year. It's a lot of fun. I watched that episode. I'm planning on watching all 5 episodes. One of the other episodes is actually Yankees and Red Sox from 2003, so that could be a fun one too if you're a Yankee fan. Things are not going well for the Yankees right now, so maybe you need something like that. But bottom line, it's a great episode. The one on the Rangers and the Canucks. Definitely recommend checking it out. And part of the reason I bring it up, we're definitely going to be discussing that on a future episode of Locked On New York Rangers, likely next week when the schedule is a little bit light. So definitely looking forward to that as well. But I figure we can call it there. Once again, if you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, there's lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well at LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, there's at LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.